MTG Mudsta, Commander tested, Goblin approved.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Welcome back to your third helping of December bonus games. This week, This game finds us back at L'Abyss, and I'm playing Thantis, keeping Crawl Space, Shamanic Revelation, Siphon Mind, a Forest, and Varchild. Sam is playing Lord Windgrace, keeping Forest, Multani, Craterhoof Behemoth, Golgari Rot Farm, Life from the Loam, Azusa, and Doubling Season. Vincent is playing Grenzo Dungeon Warden, and he is keeping Canyon Slough, Goblin Assassin, Teferi's Puzzle Box, Mountain, Buried Ruin, Spine Rock Knoll, and Thief of Blood. Lastly, Mark is playing Melek, keeping 2 Islands, Isochron Scepter, Lightning Bolt, Crater's Claws, Summary Dismissal, and Jace's Sanctum. Sam wins the die roll and starts us off. Sam plays a Forest and passes. I play a Forest and pass to Mark. Mark plays an Island, passing. Vincent plays a Spine Rock Knoll tapped, and he hides away a card. Sam casts a Green Sun Zenith for 0 in his main phase, and he goes to find a Dryad Arbor. He then plays his Golgari Rot Farm, bouncing his Forest back to hand. I draw, but with no land to play, have to pass. Super duper. Mark plays an Island, and he casts Isochron Scepter. He imprints Twin Cast onto it, and passes. Vincent plays a Canyon Slough, which comes in tapped, and he passes. Sam casts Azusa in his main phase, and he drops 2 forests back to back. He then casts Life from the Loam to put it into the bin, and passes with his Dredge Engine at the ready. I draw and play a Forbidden Orchard. Mark plays a Mountain, and we see a Lightning Bolt targeting Azusa come from his hand. Mark also activates his Scepter to twin cast the Bolt, dealing 3 to Sam for First Blood. Vincent plays a Mountain, and paying 3 casts Grenzo, with X being 1. This has him come in with a +1/+1 counter, and Vincent passes. Sam dredges back his Life from the Loam, milling himself for 3. He then recasts the Life to bring back Ghost Quarter to his hand, playing it for his turn. Sadly, he's missing a color to cast his commander, and he passes. I draw and excitedly play my second Force for the game. I then cast a Crawl Space, passing to Mark. Mark plays an Island and pays 4 to cast Jace's Sanctum. Vincent plays an Opal Palace, and he swings Grenzo at Mark for 3 commander damage. He passes, and at the end of turn, Sam uses his Ghost Quarter to destroy one of his forests and goes to find a mountain. Sam chooses to draw for turn, and he plays a Reliquary Tower. He then casts Lord Windgrace, and down takes the Planeswalker to return 2 lands to the field. I draw for turn, and play a Spine Rock Knoll as well, and I realize someone should have a Spirit for my Orchard being tapped. I give it to Mark, and then hide away a card. Mark plays a Mountain, and passes. At the end of turn, Vincent activates Grenzo's ability, and he puts the bottom card from his library into his graveyard. It's a creature with less than 3 power, which lets him cheat it out, and Mindclaw Shaman hits the field. He uses the trigger to try and steal a spell from Mark's hand. Mark doesn't really want this though, so he uses Summary Dismissal to get rid of the trigger. Vincent then activates Grenzo once more, and this time Ravenous Chupacabra hits the field. He blows up Mark's Spirit token and starts his own turn. Vincent draws and moves to combat, swinging all of his creatures at Sam for 7. This then lets Vincent activate his Spine Rock Knoll post-combat, and we see a Tuk-Tuk Scrapper hit the field, blowing up Mark's Scepter. Vincent then plays a Mountain, and he passes to Sam. Sam draws for turn, and upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding Multani and drawing 1. He then drops a Doubling Season, and the table suddenly readdresses who's the main threat. I draw and pay 4, giving Mark a Spirit. I use this mana to cast Siphon Mind, forcing everyone to discard a card and drawing 3. I then play a Forest, and I pass to Mark. Mark plays another Mountain and brings up Melek. He reveals the top card of his library, which is a land I think, but it's hard to tell with glare. At the end of his turn, Vincent activates Grenzo, knowing what it is from the hideaway trigger before, and he puts the Bajuka Bog into his graveyard. Vincent plays a Buried Ruin as his land for turn, and he casts Teferi's Puzzle Box. He then moves to combat, swinging 4 at Lord Windgrace, and the Mindclot me for 2. Sam blocks one of the attackers with his Dryad Arbor, and Lord Windgrace takes 2. Sam draws for turn and then bottoms his hand, drawing that many from Teferi's puzzle box. Sam taps out for his turn and casts Green Sun Zenith where X is 6. He goes to find a rampaging Baloth and then plays a Gaia's Cradle, which triggers the Baloth to make a token, which is then actually doubled because of doubling season. Sam then upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding Animate Dead and drawing a card. I draw and bottom my hand, drawing that many. I play a mountain as my land for turn and cast Acidic Slime. I'm torn between the box and the season, so I ask the table. We all agree except for Sam that season is the scarier thing at the moment, and I blow it up. I then pass to Mark. Mark draws a land and reveals another land, then bottoms his hand and draws that many. He plays a mountain as his land for turn and passes. At the end of turn, Vincent casts Snuff Out, taking 4 rather than paying the mana cost to kill a rampaging Baloth. He then activates Grenzo and reveals Curse of the Opulence, putting to the graveyard. Vincent draws and bottoms his hand in the order of his choice, which seems really good for Grenzo. He draws that many and plays a tap Mirrored Landscape. Vincent then passes, and at the end of turn, Sam taps his Gaia's Cradle to activate Multani's ability from the graveyard. This lets him return the legendary creature and 2 forests from his field to his hand. Sam draws for turn and bottoms his hand, and then draws that many. He then upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding Gruul Turf and drawing 2. Sam then casts Tempt with Discovery, and I turn it down while Mark agrees and Vincent says no. This lets Sam go and grab Urborg and Cabal coffers, while Mark grabs a basic. Sam then plays a Glacial Chasm as his land for turn, sacrificing his Reliquary Tower. He then activates the coffers and taps his Cradle to help pay for Oracle of Moldiah. He reveals the top card, Exploration, and we then see the rest of his mana go into Windgrace's Judgment. Sam blows up the Crawl Space, the Sanctum, and the Puzzle Box before passing. I draw for turn and play a Forest. I cast Skullwinder, choosing Vincent to also return a card. This lets me bring back Siphon Mind, and Vincent grabs his Puzzle Box. Moving to combat, the slime goes at Lord Windgrace, but is promptly stopped by a Beast token. Mark draws and reveals yet another land off the top. He then passes. At the end of turn, Vincent pays 2 and reveals Goblin Gardener. We make a slight misplay, thinking it's as it enters, not as it dies, and Vincent blows up Gaia's Cradle. Vincent then activates Grenzo again, and this time hits Deathbringer Thokdar. We then see him do it for one more time, and Thief of Blood hits the field. This steals all the counters on the field, both from Grenzo and Lord Windgrace, and the Thief gains 7+1/+1 counters. Vincent plays a Command Tower as his land for turn, and he casts Desecrated Tomb, which works well in tandem with Grenzo. He then casts a Goblin Bombardment, and moves to combat. He swings the Thief of Blood at Mark for 8, and Vincent then passes afterwards. At the end of turn, I activate my own Spine Rock Knoll, and I get to cheat out Sandworm Convergence. Sam loses 2 life on his upkeep to his Chasm, and dredges 3 to bring back life from the Loam. He then casts the life to bring back the Cradle, Arcane Lighthouse, and Gruul Turf. Sam then replays the Cradle and the Lighthouse as his land for turns, and activates the coffers. He uses the mana to recast Lord Windgrace, upticking him to discard Gruul Turf and draw 2. Sam reveals the new Vrask off the top of his library, and he casts a Wayward Swordtooth. This lets him play yet another land for turn, and Homeward Path hits the field. Sam then passes, and at the end of turn, I cast Golgari Charm, targeting Vincent's Goblin Bombardment. I also give Mark another Spirit token because I tap the Orchard, and the Bombardment gets destroyed. I play a Mountain as my land for turn, and cast Thantis in my main phase, giving Mark yet another Flyingless Spirit token, which makes no sense. I have to swing my Skullwinder, so it goes at Vince, who blocks with the Gardener. The Gardener dies, and Vince's Thokdar gains a +1/+1 counter. Moving to my end step, I gain 1 of the worms from the Convergence trigger. Mark draws and plays an island. Mark has to attack, but doesn't really want to bother Vincent or myself, so he decides to make a deal with Sam that he'll swing at him and not mess with his spells if Sam doesn't block. Sam agrees, and since he can't lose life, nothing happens. At the end of Mark's turn, Vincent activates Grenzo. He hits Virtus the Wild, who upon entering the graveyard and then coming to the field, triggers the Desecrated Tomb, giving Vincent a 1/1 bat token. Vincent draws and moves to combat. He swings Grenzo and Virtus at Mark, and everything else at Lord Windgrace. Sam lets Lord Windgrace die, and Mark takes 3 and then halves his life because of the Virtus trigger. Vincent then recasts his Puzzle Box in his second main phase, and passes. At the end of turn, Sam uses his Ghost Quarter again to blow up Arcane Lighthouse, and goes to find a basic. Sam loses 4 life on his upkeep to keep the chasm, and draws, and then bottoms his hand and draws that many cards. We get to see them all because of the Oracle. He then activates his coffers to make 8 black mana, and pays 5 to cast Ob Nixilis the Fallen. Sam then casts Horn of Greed, and reveals the swamp off the top of his library. He plays it, and draws the Gitrog monster off the top, and deals 3 to Vincent with Ob Nixilis' trigger, and also puts 3 +1/+1 counters onto Ob Nixilis. Sam then casts Hour of Promise, getting to go and find 2 lands. He grabs Maze of Ith and Thespian Stage. This also gives him 2 more triggers from Ob Nixilis, which Sam has deal 3 to me and 3 to Vincent, and gives Ob Nixilis 6 more +1/+1 counters. He then reveals the top card, and it's the same as before, #CheatCount1 Sam. Sam then casts Victimize, targeting Craterhoof Behemoth and Dryad Arbor, and sacrificing his Oracle. This gives Vincent's Thoctor another +1/+1 counter, and moving to combat, he swings the Sword Tooth and Beast at Vincent. Before moving to blockers, Vincent activates Grenzo and puts Goblin Assassin into his graveyard and then brings it out, which also has him gaining a bat token. We all then flip a Luni or a Tuni, and we all lose the flip, having to sacrifice something. This also gives the Thoctor more counters, and Vincent takes the hit and drops to 8. I draw for turn and bottom my hand, drawing that many. I play a Forest and draw from the Horn of Greed trigger. I cast Skyshroud Claim, grabbing another Forest and a Cinder Glade. I'm afraid of what Vincent might do if I swing, so I try and go for the safe option of swinging at Sam. Sam decides he doesn't like being forced to attack, and uses Ob Nixilis to block my Thantis. In my post-combat main phase, I cast Growing Rites of Itlamok, and I reveal Mina and Den. I then cast them, giving Mark another spirit token, and I move to my end step, ordering my triggers to have the conversions happen first. I then have enough creatures to flip Growing Rites into Itlamok Cradle of the Sun. Mark draws and bottoms his hand, then draws. He plays another basic because that's all he seems to draw, and he casts an Intellectual Offering off the top of his library. This gives him an extra copy of it, and he has Vincent and I draw 3 cards while Mark draws 6. He then has us all untap all of our non-land permanents except for Sam. Mark then casts Ponder from his hand, rearranging the top 3, and he draws and casts Gilded Lotus. This reveals White Boy off the top, which Mark casts to bounce Ob Nixilis and the Glacial Chasm. Vincent draws and arranges the cards from his hand as he sees fit and bottoms them, then draws that many. He then activates Grenzo, hitting Beetleback Chief. This gives him 3 Goblin Assassin triggers and a bat token. Vincent passes all of his flips, while Sam loses 2 of his, I pass all of mine, and Mark loses 1 of his. This gives the Thoctor more counters, and he then activates Grenzo again, and hits an Anathemancer, which comes in and gives him another bat. He uses the trigger to deal 8 to Sam, and Vincent then moves to combat. He swings lethal at Sam and 11 at Mark. Vincent then plays a Rocky Tar Pit in his second main phase, and pays 3 to cast Ashnod's Altar. This is pretty much game though, as Vince is now able to sacrifice his creatures to pay for Grenzo's ability, not to mention that he gets a free bat each time he gets a creature. To save myself a bit of narration, this is basically a combo that'll almost certainly finish the game. Vincent is able to sacrifice a creature for 2 colorless to Ashnod's Altar, which can activate Grenzo's ability, which in turn can find him a creature, and if it does, it gets him a bat. This means that every creature he hits is basically free with the bat, and every time he sacrifices a creature, the Thoctor gains another +1/+1 counter. Vincent has built the deck essentially to be able to go off at this point, and he's able to sacrifice enough creatures to make his Thoctor huge enough, and then remove counters from it to deal damage to Mark and I, and close out the game. Game review time. So, thank you to Vincent for lending me his Thantis deck. Unfortunately, I didn't do it any justice, and I hope that he's able to play it on camera again and actually show me how to use it. This game certainly highlighted how annoying Teferi's puzzle box is, as a lot of the footage that I had to cut was us putting stuff to the bottom and then redrawing our hand. It's even more annoying as it disrupts your hand, not to mention the fact that Vincent was the only one able to abuse it, and abuse it he did. He was able to get a lot more creatures that are worth more than 2 from the bottom of his library, and he got even more value once Desecrated Tomb was in the mix. Sam's Lord Windgrace deck seemed pretty standard, playing a lot of cards that benefited from lands coming in, like landfall creatures or Horn of Greed. He's a pretty sweet commander, and honestly if I didn't have Prosh sleeved up, I'd probably consider making him. Unfortunately for Mark, whereas in his other games he seemed to struggle with lands, this deck certainly only seemed to draw lands. Unfortunately, he wasn't very interactive except for the beginning and end of the game, and at both points using his spells to basically disrupt Sam's board. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.